And also remember that briefcase. Why did she have it? Such a manly thing for a young woman to be carrying with her.
It housed the gun, right?
It held the gun, but also, interestingly, 24 other bullets. If you're going to kill yourself, you just need one, right?
Yeah, she is definitely a spy.
Welcome to the Compendium, an assembly of twisted tales and Oslo mysteries, where the answers aren't as fair as you think.
Ooh, as fair as you think. What does that mean?
In today's episode of the Compendium, an assembly of fascinating and intriguing things, we're diving into the haunting story of a woman called Jennifer Fairgate. Now, that's the name that she used when she checked into Oslo's most prestigious hotel back in 1995. Not long after, she was found dead under bizarre circumstances. Now, this case has confounded both professional investigators and, of course, our friends of the pod, hobby detectives, aka the sleuths. But what adds layers to this intriguing story is the veil of mystery that envelops it. The odd circumstances around Jennifer's death and the questions surrounding her true identity have led many just to ponder what really happened in the days leading up to her passing in June 1995, and why Jennifer went to such great lengths to hide who she really was.
Wow, I'm getting very Cecil Hotel vibes with the people checking in under different names and then they die. I'm intrigued. What happened to her?
That's what we're here to find out today.
Okay.
But before we do that, should we get on with introductions?
Let's do it.
For those of you tuning in for the very first time, I'm your host, Kyle Risi.
And I'm your co-host, Adam Cox.
And you are listening to The Compendium, an assembly of fascinating and intriguing things. We are a weekly variety podcast where I, Kyle Risi, tell Adam Cox all about a topic that I think he'll find both fascinating and intriguing, from groundbreaking events to unforgettable people. We do this all in a simple 1 hour-ish episode, giving you just enough information to stand your ground at a social gathering. Adam, before we jump into today's topic, how's your week been?
My week's been good. We've obviously celebrated your birthday. You turned 21 again.
I did. I feel 21. I look in the mirror and I'm not 21. Actually, that's such a sad reality because you hear elderly people, our grandparents, our parents say it, and they go time and time again, they feel like they're still 16 at heart, but then they look in the mirror and they're like, who is this person looking back at me? And I feel like the longer I keep living, the more instances where I'm looking in that mirror and I'm going, who is this person looking back at me? In fact, the other day, I found a grey chest hair. And it wasn't just grey, it was white. It was so white, I was literally blinded. That's why I left that on the bathroom cabinet for you.
Yeah, that was very thoughtful of you. Thanks.
You're welcome. I want you to be part of these monumental moments in our lives as we transcend the veil from the living to the dead.
Wow, morbid thought.
So what have you got for me today?
I don't know if you've heard of the artist Marina Abramovic.
Sounds like some kind of composer. It's got to be.
No, she's a Serbian performance type artist. So she's been going for about 5 decades. And some of her pieces of work, you can basically interact however you will with her body in a weird way. So someone actually even held up a loaded gun to her head.
Shit.
At one point. Another point, I think she spent 8 hours a day just like sitting in a room and you could just watch her.
What is she doing?
No, it's art. I don't really get it.
Okay.
But essentially, the Royal Academy of Arts is presenting a retrospective of all of her sort of performance artist work over the last few years.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want to go and visit this, I think it's on video, I'm assuming, you have to.
Oh, God, Adam. When you start something with a laugh, it just gets me feeling really uneasy.
In order to enter the building, you have to squeeze past 2 nude performance artists.
Okay. Are they hot?
They are nude. They're standing about a meter or 2 apart, looking each other in the eye. and there's a big enough gap for an average-sized human being to squeeze past them on the way in.
Okay.
I'm going to show you a picture.
Oh, God. Oh, God. They're attractive, so that's not so bad. But her boobs have seen better days.
Don't say that.
But that's bizarre.
So
but you very specifically said an average-sized person. What about those plus-size beauties that...
There's not enough room to fit past. It's very close. I mean, that woman doesn't know where to look. She's not looking them straight in the eye. She's not looking at their
No, that's
areas.
awkward. And there's definite peen kind of rubbing, touching.
Yeah. But there is an entrance if you didn't want to do that.
Yeah, because boundaries.
Yeah. But I thought that was very odd.
Yeah.
And the people that volunteer for this, do you want a job standing naked?
And is this recent?
I think it was the last couple of weeks. Yeah.
Damn. How long's it running for?
I don't know. So if you're in the London area.
Very good. So all the latest things comes from, do you remember those anti-privacy adverts that would display before you'd watch a DVD? And they had that very distinctive slogan, which was like, you wouldn't steal a car, so why would you steal a DVD?
Oh, yeah, that's right. They would scare you thinking you can go to prison.
Yeah, listen to this. You wouldn't steal a car. You wouldn't steal a handbag.
Oh, yeah.
You wouldn't steal a television.
I remember this.
You wouldn't steal a mobile phone. So why would you steal a DVD? Just in case we get sued, that's all we can play.
Oh, really?
Because actually, this whole segment's about anti-privacy, right?
Oh, okay.
But yeah, do you remember that?
I do remember that. It was on, all DVDs at the time.
Exactly. So this haunting tune was composed by a Dutch musician named Melky Rietveld. So he was a Dutch musician, and he created this piece for a local film festival in 2006, right? Now, here's where things get truly rich with irony, because the music in that anti-privacy advert, the one that's basically lecturing you on the ethics of stealing, was itself stolen.
No way.
Yeah. So Rietveld never actually gave any permission for his work to be used outside of the film festival whatsoever, let alone in a campaign against piracy. He received no credit, no payment, nothing. And he had to obviously settle the issue legally, which obviously that's all kept private. So we don't know exactly to what extent he was paid out. But can you just imagine his reaction when he first heard this composition in that context? The irony.
And the hypocrisy.
And it's just a wake-up call that even entities that position themselves as moral authorities can just be as big as shitbags as everyone else. Really. So I thought that was pretty funny. That's all I've been doing this week, looking up stupid facts.
That was a good one.
Yeah.
Should we get on with the show?
Let's do it. Okay. Are you ready?
I am ready.
So on the night of Wednesday, May the 31st, 1995, a young woman dressed in black walked into the Plaza Hotel in Oslo in Norway. And this was no ordinary hotel. It was the city's most luxurious place to stay at the time. And she wasn't just any guest either. She had booked room 2805, which is a high-end room on the 28th floor with a stunning view of the city. For this, she would pay 1,845 kroner per night, which is around about £400 today.
Quite expensive, but
it's a
nice hotel.
It's a fancy hotel. So even though the lobby was bustling with new arrivals, she in particular stood out because of the way that she was dressed. Now, 2 days later, on the morning of Friday, June the 2nd, she decided to extend her stay through the weekend. Notices started popping up on her TV in her room, asking her to come to the front desk and settle up her bill. And each time, she simply grabbed the TV remote and clicked OK to acknowledge that she had received the message. Yet, intriguingly, she never actually made it to the front desk to actually pay. On the evening of Saturday, June the 3rd, 3 days since the mysterious woman had checked into the hotel, the receptionist, a woman called Evie, noticed something was off. The woman hadn't given a credit card and she had exceeded her credit limit. So at 7:36, Evie sent yet another message to the room's TV, this time more urgent. Please contact the cashier. And once again, the woman clicked OK, but nothing more. Evie then discovered the previous unanswered messages and realized that housekeeping hadn't been in the room since Thursday. A do not disturb sign had also been hanging on the door since Friday. So concerned, she alerted the hotel security.
Okay.
Now, just before 7:50 p.m., Epson something, I don't know that name. I'm not going to pretend to even pronounce it. So he's a part-time security guard, and he was given the task to check on room 2805. Now, Epson rode the elevator to the 28th floor, walked up to the mysterious woman's door, and knocked. Moments later, a gunshot ran out from inside the room. Not knowing what to do, Epson hid behind a nearby alcove in the hallway, and with no further sounds coming from the room, he decided that he would return to the ground floor and inform the security chief about what just had happened. For the next 15 minutes, after that gunshot rang out, room 2805 remained unguarded. So it's a gap in time that leaves us wondering, did anyone leave the room during those minutes? At 8:04, the security chief himself decided to investigate. He rode up to the 28th floor, he knocked on the door 3 times, but like before, no answer came from within. The door was secured with a double lock from the inside, which meant that only security could gain access. Using his keycard, the chief opened the door and he found a disturbing scene. A woman lay dead on the bed, her arms folded against her chest and her legs were hanging off the edge of the bed. The TV was on, the curtain was flapping against the open window, and a peculiar smell filled the air. Now, despite shouting out at her, there was no response. And realizing the gravity of the situation, the chief immediately closed the door and ordered his team to call the police. So we have a dead body on our hands.
A mystery.
It is a mystery. So by 8:50 p.m., the police had arrived at the Plaza Hotel. Now, a person called Uden Christensen, who was with the Oslo Police Department at the time, said that he approached room 2805 with extreme caution. Once inside, he found the woman dead with a single gunshot wound to her forehead, and a gun lay in her right hand, which was resting on her chest, and her thumb was still on the trigger, stuck in the firing position. When police took the gun from her hand, they heard a click as the trigger moved back into its original position. Now, the bullet's trajectory showed that it had been shot while she was laying on her back on the bed, and the blood had soaked through the linen, reaching the mattress beneath her. She was dressed in a black jacket that went down to her thighs, silk pajama bottom shorts, stockings, and black pumps. Intriguingly, both key cards were found inside the room, and since the door had been double locked from within, it would have been impossible for someone else to lock it from the outside. There was no signs of anyone else being in the room, and there was no signs of there being any kind of struggle. All the evidence had pointed to her being alone in this room.
Okay, just to recap, she is laying on the bed. She has a gun wound in her forehead. So it's implying that she has shot herself. Mm-hmm. And the way that her thumb is on the trigger, there's obviously some pressure still there to keep it down.
That's right. So that cell tells me that she died instantly.
Yeah, but then if you're pointing a gun to your forehead and you're using your thumb to pull the trigger, that's what I'm guessing.
Yes.
Then you've shot yourself. But then I would have thought that'd be instant. You'd be out pretty much if it's in the brain. But then somehow her hand seems like it was neatly on her chest.
Exactly.
And it was still, the pressure was on the gun?
Exactly. So according to Officer Christensen, the evidence suggested that the woman had spent most of her time inside the room. Even more perplexing was that there was no sign that anyone entered the room during or around the time of her death. And the crime scene reports concluded it was overwhelmingly likely that this woman had committed suicide. And because of this, the police didn't take many steps that would usually be standard in a suspicious death case. They didn't keep the bed sheets or the pillows as evidence. They didn't question many of the hotel guests or staff, nor did they secure the room for an extended period of time while they investigated. They were just like, this woman has killed herself.
Sure. So I guess they have, I don't know, they've seen the body and they've made this assumption, haven't they? But had they maybe, I'm assuming that at that point they hadn't taken her thumb off the trigger or anything like that at this point. They're just like, oh, it's a suicide. Let's just clear this place up.
But here's the part that baffles everyone. When investigators searched the room, they found absolutely nothing that could reveal who this woman was. There was no credit cards, There was no driver's license, no plane tickets. There wasn't even a handbag, a wallet, or any money. Things like pictures, car keys, house keys, which most tourists would have, were also missing from the scene. Everyday items like toothbrushes, hairbrushes, cosmetics, toiletries were also nowhere to be found, or even books or magazines, which is absent. It gets stranger. There was no passport found in the room either, which is unusual given that passports are generally required to visit Norway, right? When the police inspected her clothing for clues, they found that all the labels within her clothes had been removed.
That's weird.
That is weird. The only piece of clothing, a grey blazer hanging inside the closet, offered a clue. It was traced back to a German fashion house and sold in Germany. What was even stranger is her choice of clothing. While she had an array of clothes for her upper body, she brought nothing extra for the lower half. No trousers, no skirts, no dresses. She didn't even have extra underwear or shoes with her either. And the police think that she may have gotten rid of some of these items before her death.
So what was she wearing on her bottom half?
Like these silk pajama bottoms. Okay. And I believe that's what she might have arrived in. And I say silk pajama bottoms, it's just maybe the style. They look like silk pajama bottoms. Okay. But I think at the time they were fashionable enough to be worn outside. But that's it.
That's it. So one pair of like trousers, so to speak, and then a few tops and a jacket.
They were like shorts because she was wearing tights. Oh. So in the room, they also found cologne, but it was made for men. They found a travel bag and an attaché case, which is like a briefcase, basically, and that was of German origin. An ironing board and an iron were also in the room, even though those items aren't standard amenities. This suggests that she might have requested them, and housekeepers who had been in the room noted how oddly tidy it was, almost as if no one was actually staying in the room whatsoever. So perhaps one of the most puzzling elements is how she managed to check into a 5-star hotel like the Plaza without any identification, credit card, or even paying in advance, considering the hotel's existing clientele often include famous individuals. This seemed to investigators like a significant lapse in their usual strict security protocols of the hotel. And how she managed to bypass these procedures is still baffling.
So they do have them in place at this hotel?
Yeah.
Usually your passport, unless she was local to the country, that's the only time you wouldn't need a passport, right?
Potentially. What's bizarre is that the information that she filled in on a registration card when she checked in was also proven to be completely false. What she did is she filled her name in as Jennifer Fairgate. Her telephone number was listed as a Belgian number, as well as her address, which was an address in Belgium. She also listed her company name as a company called Cerebus, I believe that's how you pronounce it, which was an existing business, but it turns out that they had no record that she ever worked there. So the police contacted the Belgian authorities, who were no help at all, because it turned out that all of the details that she provided just didn't exist. Even more puzzling were the 2 phone numbers in Belgium that she had dialed from her hotel room. They were nearly identical, differing by just 1 digit, and both numbers were non-existent.
So she dialed them from her hotel room? So do you think she wrote them down and went, let me just check these numbers, make sure they don't go anywhere? Why would you, unless it's a signal to something?
When police checked the room for fingerprints, they only found hers, which didn't match any of the details on the Interpol database. Even the gun had no fingerprints, and this led some investigators to reconsider whether or not her death was actually a suicide.
So her... what?
Exactly, it's bizarre. So further scrutiny revealed that Jennifer had booked her room about a week before she had arrived. The hotel front desk operator remembered the call. She apparently spoke in English, and the background was quiet, suggesting that she wasn't calling from a phone booth or from a busy public area. So what do you make of all of this?
So at the moment, she has hidden her identity. That name doesn't exist. She doesn't have a passport. All the labels in her clothes are missing, yet she's given Belgian address that some of them may or may not be real, made up. But I don't understand.
It is just confounding. Why would someone go through such lengths to erase their identity? So what's also baffling is that on the day before she arrived, she actually called up the hotel and asked if she could extend her check-in period to later that evening.
Okay.
But at the same time, she also asked if she could add someone else to the registration card. And that was a man called Louis Fairgate. Now, when she checked in, apparently Louis was with her. At some point, someone observed Louis standing with her when she was either checking in or when she came back downstairs to exchange some currency. But after that, Louis disappears from the story altogether.
Is there CCTV footage at this point in time?
They didn't check the CCTV footage, even though there was CCTV footage at the time. Because her death was considered a suicide, they just didn't feel it was necessary.
Okay, weird.
It is weird.
And so this guy may or may not have been there at the very beginning. And was this when she was speaking in German, when she wanted to check him in as well?
That's right. So the first time she called up, she spoke in English. The second time she phoned up, she spoke in German. I mean, does that give us a clue to her identity? Yes, on the registration card, she used Belgian details, but there are some clues that are inside the room that indicate German origin. For example, the blazer and the briefcase, as well as the cologne. I just feel like there is some strange connection to Germany that she is potentially trying to conceal.
Could have obviously visited Germany, so it doesn't necessarily need to have come from Germany. But then it feels something very like mafia, underground.
Do you think it sounds sinister?
A little bit, because there's obviously this question whether she was in the room by herself, if someone was acknowledging these messages, but actually she was perhaps already dead. Then the whole no fingerprints. There's just something very clinical about this.
Yes. It's bizarre, isn't it? So the hotel's tight security and cameras could have offered some clarity, but since the police initially treated the case as a suicide, they never reviewed the footage. So that answers your question. This decision only increased the frustration of those keen to solve this baffling mystery, because if they had just kept it, we would have known, A, was Louis real? And under what circumstances did she check in?
Yeah.
Was she being coerced? Was she being led? Was she being trafficked? What was the situation?
Yeah.
Despite any lack of missing person reports matching Jennifer's description, the case was initially investigated as a homicide. But the line of inquiry didn't build any kind of traction whatsoever because nobody came forward to report her missing. And so the notion of suicide was just revisited, and that's what was concluded. And it was supported by certain pieces of evidence, like the door was double locked from the inside. There was no signs of a struggle that were visible. Her body didn't bear any kind of form of injuries that would suggest a struggle. And also, no one seemed to have been in the room or had entered, at least based on the evidence that we have at hand. Right?
Yeah.
There's that 15-minute window when the security guard went downstairs to get the police chief. But other than that, there's just no evidence.
Someone could have been hiding in a cupboard or closet.
Oh, are you suggesting that after they murdered her, they hid in a closet, and then when someone came into the room, they then managed to sneak out some way?
I don't know.
That's plausible.
Because you can't really, I'm assuming you wouldn't escape through a window because you're on the 28th floor. That'd be quite dangerous.
The window was open, unless there was a ledge or something. I guess we don't know. So the police held onto Jennifer's body for a whole year, hoping that someone would come forward to identify her. But nobody ever did. So in 1996, they made the sad decision to just close the case and then bury her. And on the 26th of June, she was laid to rest in a cemetery in Oslo, and it was a pauper's grave. There was no priest, there was no headstone, and not a single person was there to mourn her. Just a simple coffin lowered into the ground. And that was it. The case was closed.
That's sad.
It's really sad.
I guess they couldn't find anyone else's DNA on her.
At the time, DNA wasn't really a thing that was commonplace in these types of cases in Norway. But also her case was deemed a suicide, so they also didn't feel it was necessary. And it was an emerging tech, so they could have, but they just didn't feel it was necessary.
I guess it's not uncommon from what we learned from the Cecil Hotel. People would check in under an alias and then would commit suicide. They would do that because they wanted to not be traced and tracked. And it sounds like she went through to extreme lengths to not reveal any identity.
Crazy extreme lengths, right? Checking in under a different name, but cutting out your labels, not bringing anything with you, like mad. So 2 months after she was buried, the chief of police gave an order to get rid of all the evidence that they gathered. This means that Jennifer's clothes, her personal belongings, even the samples taken from her skin were all destroyed. Her valuables like a ring and her earrings, they were all sold off at auction. But here's a twist. It turned out that the gun wasn't actually destroyed. This was kept by police, and this is going to give us a few clues. Now, let's talk about Lars Christiansen Wegner. I believe that's how you pronounce his name. So he's a journalist from Norway who had been on the case since 1996, and he stumbled upon Jennifer's story while he was working on a series about missing persons. Wegner thinks that Jennifer's life obviously counts for something, and it absolutely does, right? He believes that her unmarked grave should at least have some kind of headstone with her name on it. But he just doesn't know who she is, so he decides that he's going to set out on a journey to try and see if he can discover who she was with the very minimal clues that we have to go on.
Mm-hmm.
So in 1996, Wegner penned an article about Jennifer that appeared in a local newspaper, and he tucked his note away in a case in his desk drawer, and over 2 decades he would occasionally revisit the story, but nothing ever came of it. But he couldn't just shake the story off. So fast forward to 2016, Wegner felt that it was time to just do one last final effort into trying to uncover this mystery. And so he headed to the small Belgian village that Jennifer had listed on her registration card, and he felt that there must be some reason why she decided to list this address down on that registration card. Because the address existed, so she must have known or had some kind of connection to this place, right?
There's some significance to her.
Has to be. So to help him, he roped in Cedric Largast. He was a local reporter, and he was asked to help dig deeper and help him chat with kind of some of the locals. So Wegner and Last met with Hubert Jonnet. He was the mayor of Verlaine, who had spent his whole life in the town. And they showed him sketches of Jennifer and asked if, he recognized her. And he just drew a blank. So following this, they decided to try and show the sketch to some of the locals in the area. And interestingly, a couple did say that she looked remarkably like one of the residents' sister-in-laws. But eventually this lead also just fizzled out because they managed to find this sister-in-law, and they found that she was alive and well. And as for the address that Jennifer had listed on her registration card, while the street existed, the exact house did not exist at all. The street numbers actually ended before they got to her number, which I believe is 142. So they were just at a loss. Even a search through her local birth records returned absolutely nothing. And Jennifer's supposed birth date that she listed on that registration card didn't have any matches whatsoever. So they just found nothing. Now, Wegner and Last eventually came to speculate that maybe Jennifer probably wasn't from the area, but there must be something linking her to this place because she knew so many of the specific details within the area. Like, for example, the street name. Also, her telephone number was of the area, and the 2 numbers that she called from the actual hotel room were from this area as well.
So she's, used some half-truths for this.
So what was she doing? What were the significance of those numbers? Could they be signals that she would dial the number, yes, they didn't exist, but maybe they triggered some kind of signal to someone?
That's what I was wondering, if there was something being sent to say, yep, I'm here, or whatever.
Yeah. That mafia link that you were talking about.
Something a bit more sinister. Or she was just going, oh, hang on, does that number exist? Let me just double check. I don't know. Yeah, it's weird.
It's messed up. So the police thought that Jennifer might have been depressed. She may have just taken her own life. But there are also reasons to question that. For one, it looks like she had taken a shower just before she had killed herself. Now, the hotel's bathrobe was on the bed and a used towel was on the floor in the bathroom. Near the sink, there was a soap bar and even some shampoo bottles that had been used. Plus, she was also dressed quite nicely. She'd done her makeup, she had eyeliner on, and they say that it looked like she was almost getting ready to go on a night out. So if she was depressed, she would be moping around the room, right? She wouldn't have gone out of bed. The room wouldn't have been as clean as it was. It was tidy.
I guess so. But I guess you don't know if she was depressed, what kind of state her mind was in, because she might have just been getting ready to make herself look nice for the last time. Yeah. But then if you are really depressed, then you perhaps wouldn't think that. I don't know.
I don't think she was depressed. Maybe it was a hit. Maybe it was an accepted hit. Maybe someone was there to kill her. Maybe she was instructed to kill herself. Maybe she's not part of the mafia. Maybe she's higher up. Maybe it's something more official.
Maybe. Feels almost like a spy, actually.
That's the vibe that I'm getting.
Yeah.
And it's a potential theory that we cover in this, right? And we'll explain why in just a moment when we have a look at what some experts say. But some experts do have different opinions about the gun. One said that it looked like it was a mix of various parts. It was a makeshift gun. It was like a Hungarian knockoff from decades ago. So it looked like a Browning kind of pistol gun. And it's a really powerful gun. And experts thought that it came from some kind of Hungarian factory called, I think it's called the FEG, which means nothing to me. They also said that it wasn't in great condition, pointing that it might have potentially some kind of criminal background.
Okay.
And then there's the way that Jennifer held the gun as well. According to Wegner, that's the journalist, her grip was not what you'd expect. When she was found, her thumb was on the gun's trigger while her fingers were there on the other side of the handle. So this is puzzling because how did she manage to keep hold of such a powerful gun in such an odd grip? Because remember, this is a real serious weapon. It's a military grade weapon and it's a powerful gun with a real strong kind of kickback.
Kickback, yeah.
So she's holding the gun in that particular way with these small hands, shooting herself using her thumb. You're going to have some kind of recoil.
Mm-hmm.
And her hand wouldn't be expected to be just laying elegantly across her chest.
That's the bit I think is weird.
But there's more to it. The gun's force would have left some kind of scorch mark on her hand as well. But there was nothing. And this raises questions about whether or not there was someone else in the room.
I feel like there's a hit.
The chief pathologist who examined Jennifer's body pointed out that normally when people take their lives with their gun, their hands are shaky, right? So what they will typically do is they will try and stabilize the gun by putting their other hand around the barrel to try and keep it still.
I see.
And also to stop the recoil, right? And when you are doing this, if you then shoot a bullet into your forehead, you are going to have some blood around your fingers where you were stabilizing the gun.
Okay. From the impact on the bullet.
Yeah, but there just wasn't, right? There was no blood, there was no soot, there was no gunshot residue. This is the first time that the pathologist had ever seen anything like this in a suicide case. Even stranger, there were blood spots that were scattered all around the room, on the bed, on the pillow, on the phone, on the table, and even on the ceiling. But not a speck was on Jennifer's hands. So all of these factors make it hard to rule out the possibility that someone else might have been involved.
So if it's not on her hands, what were her hands doing at the time? Were they tied up?
Yep.
Or it suggests that she didn't have any injury marks, so maybe she wasn't like seriously tied up, so she wasn't trying to get away.
Could someone have been holding her down, maybe laying their knees on her arms,
Possibly.
pinned down? That would explain why there was no blood on her hands. They'd shot her and then they'd staged the scene.
Mm-hmm.
That's where my mind's going.
That's what it feels like.
Yeah. So Wegner takes it upon himself to try and piece together and reconstruct the crime scene with the help of a few experts, who brings up an important detail. The absence of blood on Jennifer's chest and her clothes, as we just mentioned. He argues that if nothing was blocking the blood, you would expect to find it on her hands and her body and her face and things like that. He thinks that the killer could have pinned Jennifer's arms down using his knees, placed his hand over her face to tilt her head back into the correct position, and then fired a shot. After that, the gun was then placed into Jennifer's hands to make it look like a suicide.
Yeah, that's what it feels like. And if the gun is wiped down or someone was wearing gloves.
Yeah, no fingerprints.
And then if her fingerprints aren't properly on the gun, because you'd think they'd be all over it because she'd be handling it in all sorts of ways. Yeah.
Weird. So also Wegner raises another crucial question. Why didn't Jennifer fight back? Iverson suggests that she might have been unconscious at the time, perhaps even drugged, but Wegner points out the police only tested her system for alcohol, which means that we don't know if there was any drugs in her system. Her body's now been destroyed. So to get a clearer picture of what unfolded in that room, 2805, Wegner created a timeline using, ingeniously, the logs from Jennifer's keycard. Now, it's important to note that the keycard only records people entering into the room, but not when they exit, right? Because you don't need to insert the card.
Sure.
So the timeline reveals that Jennifer first entered the room on Wednesday, the 31st of May at 10:44 p.m. That's that late check-in. After that, the keycard was used on Thursday at 12:21 a.m. So she'd obviously been out for the night, maybe gone out for some drinks. Thursday at 8:34 a.m. So Friday, and then Friday at 8:50 a.m. And then lastly on Friday at 11:03 a.m. After that point, the card was never used again.
So the theory is she last went into the room on Friday at 11 a.m.
So a message sent to Jennifer's TV on Thursday afternoon went unanswered until Friday morning, and another message sent on Friday night got a response within minutes. She also used the pay-per-view TV twice, once on Friday and again on Saturday. And because she wasn't seen entering and leaving the room much, police thought that she might have been in a room most of the time getting ready for what they believed was potentially her suicide.
Mm-hmm.
So Wegner talked to a few of the witnesses to fill in a little bit more of the details around Jennifer's stay. For instance, when hotel maids checked her room before 1 p.m. on Thursday, it was empty. And that means from Thursday morning until she used her key card to enter the room at 8:50 a.m. on Friday, she was somewhere else. She didn't stay in the room that night.
Right.
No one knows where she was for those 24 hours. Was she meeting with someone in Oslo? Maybe she was exploring the city. Did she know someone else in Oslo? Why was she out all night when she had a hotel room?
That is, I guess we've still got this mystery over if she was with another man.
Yeah, we'd never hear from him again. That's all the information we have. One of the maids also noticed, nice little detail, a pair of nice shoes in Jennifer's room when she was out, right? Yet when her body was discovered, those shoes were gone.
Male shoes or female shoes?
Female shoes.
Do you think maybe because there wasn't many clothes found, someone who potentially might have killed her might have taken some of her belongings with her?
Possibly. But I don't know how they could have gotten out of the room.
Yeah, that still doesn't make sense.
It doesn't. And when they questioned the maid, she was sure that the shoes that she had seen were not the same ones that Jennifer was wearing when her body was found. Something else that caught the maid's attention was the spare set of bed sheets was unused and still tucked away in the closet. But when Jennifer's body was found, those same sheets that she had tucked into the closet were then on the bed. She didn't put them on the bed. Who put those new sheets on the bed? Who does that?
Yeah, I agree, because if you go to this hotel and you're thinking about committing suicide, probably last thing on your mind is making your bed.
Yeah.
I would think.
So on Friday morning, another hotel worker saw Jennifer put a do not disturb sign on the door, and from that point on, she seems to have never left the room. That was it. So Kristen Anderson, a room service employee at the hotel, was possibly the last person to see Jennifer alive. Around about 8:06 p.m. on the Friday, Jennifer ordered a meal of, and again, another clue, bratwurst and potato salad. So again, that's a German meal.
Yeah.
Even though there was no credit card on file for her, she managed to get the meal added to her tab. And when Kristen arrived at the room at 8:23 p.m., he says the room was notably tidy, almost sterile. And the bed looked like it hadn't even been touched. But she gave Kristen a 50 kroner tip, which is quite generous for the time. I think it's worth £6.
Right.
And that's the only cash that was linked to Jennifer that the police had found.
So why did no one, although I probably know the answer to this because they suspected it was a suicide, but no one questioned the whole checking in, the fact that she didn't leave any credit cards or identity information. So for someone to be able to do that, they must have either coerced the person on the desk to say, hey, I'll give you an extra tip if you can just get me in this room or whatever.
True. I guess there's a couple of theories there, right? Could be that, exactly what you said, or their security isn't as tight as they're making it out to be. Maybe
True.
They make these allowances all the time, and they're probably trying to cover that up because if they find that actually their security is lax, they might get into trouble because the hotel is quite an important hotel. But before we get there, final detail on Jennifer. So on that night, Jennifer was wearing a skirt and had a suitcase with her. Oddly, both were missing from the room at her death. The meal she ordered was still there, half eaten. Jennifer's autopsy showed that the meal was still in her stomach, undigested. This raises an interesting question, because at the time that they think she died, that was a whole 24 hours after she'd ordered that meal. So did she die on that Friday night, or did she wait almost the entire day before she had a single bite of that food?
That would be weird. I would never leave food that long.
No, you wouldn't.
Yeah. But then, is there reports that they definitely know that she died on the Saturday then? Is that when they pinpoint her death?
I don't think they definitely know.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're basing this pretty much on the fact that the gunshot rang out when the security guard came to check on her. And they're assuming that's when she died. A little small detail is that when they were checking the crime scene, there was another shot that was fired. And this shot seems like it was a test shot that she may have fired through a pillow, using a pillow to silence it. It rang right through the pillow, through the mattress, and embedded itself in the floor underneath, only just a few inches away from where the other bullet that killed her rang out. They think it was a test shot because the pillow was flipped around after that test shot was made, because there's a scorch mark on the backside of it where the gun would have left that scorch mark.
Yeah, could someone have killed her on the Friday, maybe with a silencer as well, to do that, but then stayed in the room, then did the shot on the Saturday to then, I don't know, then cause the escape, essentially. It feels like an escape room.
Yeah, yes, it does feel like an escape room. So various theories float around why Jennifer was in Oslo. Some say that she could have been involved in a drug smuggling kind of operation. Others speculate that she might have been a high-class sex worker. And others even talk about her possibly being a secret agent or an assassin.
She's a secret agent or undercover
I
something.
think so. In the 1990s, the Plaza Hotel in Oslo was a hot spot for secret international politics.
Told ya.
So leaders from around the world would gather there to discuss like serious political matters, right? For example, the Israel and Palestinian authorities held really super hush-hush talks in various rooms and conference areas. But when Jennifer obviously was found dead, there was no political talks and meetings happening at the time.
Right.
But I think it's an interesting point to note that if she was a secret agent and she is connected to governments and politics in some kind of way, and if this hotel is known to be used by various governments in various talks and negotiations, then maybe it could be a hotel that is used by various secret agents as a place where they routinely dispose of maybe defective secret agents. It's a place where they maybe come, they have their identity cleared, and then they get disposed of.
Would you do that? Would you go like, okay, you now need to go commit your suicide? And they're like, yeah, okay, fine. Would that, you'd only do that for a reason, i.e. maybe to protect your family or something like that. There's a reason you're doing that, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Possibly.
Yeah.
So enter Ola Kelderge.
Sure, we'll go with that.
Enter a guy called Ola.
Okay.
Basically, he is quite a big name in the Norwegian intelligence service. He's no stranger to the kind of the global hotspots, having worked in places like the Middle East, in the Balkans, and in Africa. And when asked about Jennifer's case, he says that he didn't think for a moment that this was a simple suicide. Instead, he suggests that it might have been a well-planned operation, perhaps even an assassination. He points out some strange facts. For instance, the way that Jennifer supposedly shot herself didn't add up. And then there was the gun. Someone had used acid to remove the registration number on the actual gun itself.
Oh, really?
Now, this is a trick that some experts say that spy agencies and not your average criminal will use when removing a serial number from a gun. If you were a criminal, what they normally do is they grind the number off using some kind of like little small grinding tool. Mm-hmm. Whereas secret agents and government officials and these different departments, they will use acid, and it's done in a very professional way. And there's telltale signs when you've removed a serial number using acid versus grinding it off.
Interesting.
And this odd detail links to the possibility that it could have been some kind of intelligence agency involved in this. So he points out that removing labels from the clothes is a pretty standard practice in the intelligence world. Why? Because you don't want anyone tracing your clothes back to a specific country. Now, Jennifer being missing from the hotel for a long period of time also seems to make sense to him as well. He thinks that she probably had a second spot to go to as a backup location, just like an agent would apparently. And as for the locked door from the inside, he says that that is no hurdle that an expert within the intelligence community couldn't overcome. If they wanted to get into that room or they wanted to double lock that from the outside, then those capabilities are completely within their reach.
Okay.
What do you think of that?
I believe him.
Do you?
Yes.
Ooh. I think I believe him as well.
I don't think it's an average Joe like murderer or anything like that. If there's someone else like involved in this, it's definitely higher up, and it's trying to be kept hush hush.
But what really gets his attention is how clean the whole situation was. There's no evidence, right? There's no traces. There's no family members asking questions. He suspects that this was a professional job and that someone came in afterwards to tidy up the loose ends. So there's a part of me that thinks that maybe she did die on the Friday. Maybe she was drugged. Maybe she was smothered. Maybe something else. And then someone came in hours and hours later
to do the next
to
part.
actually stage the rest of it.
Yeah. And also, who's to say that the police and the hotel aren't somehow involved?
Yeah.
If this is like a political hotel that is notorious for this kind of like meetups and stuff like that, could there have been someone like masquerading as some hotel worker.
Yeah.
And then the police coming in going, oh, yeah, it's just a suicide. Let's just wrap this up.
Yeah.
Who knows?
I think I maybe buy that as well, because if this hotel's hosting all these dignitaries, right? All these secret services and these agents will also be involved in checking the security and reviewing it and things like that. And they might have access to certain things, certain cards and things like that. Like if you were hosting the President of the United States, for an example, he would send the Secret Service out there to check everything, make sure the security is all in place, maybe have backup things in place. And maybe they just had access to these things over the years.
And the fact that no one even thought to check security, or she may have had a passport or a fake passport when checking in, and someone maybe scrapped that information, got rid of it.
He also says that if Jennifer was indeed an agent who had met a fate as this, the government would quite likely have offered the family a settlement and make them promise to not say anything, or maybe make them sign something because she was part of the intelligence services. They may have even gone to them and said, listen, your daughter died in the line of duty and she's a hero. Here is a nice little settlement to sort you out for the rest of your lives. Don't speak about this because the details around what she was doing is really sensitive.
Yeah.
And maybe that's why someone's not come forward.
Maybe.
And that's what this Ola guy is suggesting. One big gap in the case is the lack of Jennifer's DNA. DNA testing wasn't the go-to method in the Norwegian investigation process back then, although they initially did keep blood samples. These were all destroyed in 1996 after she was buried. Now, if anyone wanted to get a DNA sample, they'd have to go to the lengths of exhuming her body. So in 2016, over 2 decades after Jennifer's death, her body is dug up and they managed to extract a complete DNA profile of Jennifer's body, considering that she had been buried for 20 years. And after the testing, the science points to European roots, specifically indicating that she may have spent her early years in northern Germany, which is really interesting because now we have loads of clues that point all to Germany. Remember the cologne, the fact that she was speaking fluent German, the food choices that she ordered when she was staying at the hotel, the blazer jacket, and of course the briefcase containing the gun, all German. So one of the hotel workers working at the hotel front desk remembered that Jennifer spoke German, but not just any German. She had an accent that sounded like it came from the eastern part of the country. Now, could it be that she was from Eastern Germany, or at least lived there for a while, long enough for her to develop this accent? As far as the DNA goes, the police also did hit a dead end. There were no matches to the DNA found anywhere. They were not on any of the databases, and they couldn't identify any links to her whatsoever. But while this to us might seem suspicious, remember of the time, DNA evidence wasn't that mainstream, so it could be that there was just never an opportunity to get her logged into some kind of database while she was alive.
Yeah, I can't imagine there'd be as many people on record.
That's right. So Wegner was stumped, but he wasn't ready to give up just yet. The age on Jennifer's registration card that she filled out at the hotel was put down that she was 22, but her autopsy report estimated that her age was around about 30 years old. Now, there was a way to pin down her exact age just a little bit further. And this is where we get introduced to a guy called Henrik Druid. So he's a Swedish professor who is skilled in various forms of forensics. Now, he suggests that there could be another way to determine her exact age. And basically, this comes out of the Cold War. Now, between 1955 and 1963, various nuclear bomb tests were happening all around the world. And these tests caused a spike in C14 levels in the atmosphere. Certain parts of the body, like the enamel in our teeth, can absorb this C14. And because of this, scientists can actually use teeth to tell when a person was born by comparing the amount of C14 content that was in the atmosphere at the time, compared to when these bombs have been set off during this time. So fast forward to 2018, experts use this method to find out that Jennifer was probably born in 1971. And this means that she would have been 24 at the time that she died. There's also a couple other clues that also indicate that she may have grew up in Germany. One notable clue was the ring that she was wearing when they found her body. The numbers that were engraved in the ring indicated that its origin was from the Germany area. Also, her handwriting style that was used on the hotel registration card was typical of a German native. Not to mention that her travel bag that was made in Germany by a company called Travelite, and the dental work that they observed when they were getting that sample of the C14 from her teeth indicated that some of the work that she had done on her teeth were typical of Germany at that time.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Isn't it incredible that they can do that?
That makes sense. I'm guessing there's different techniques in different countries for dental work.
I guess so. But also, let's not forget that a witness confirmed that she also spoke German. So all these pieces of the puzzle start coming together, suggesting that she was likely a woman from East Germany.
Okay, I get it, Kyle. She's from Germany.
She's from Germany. So Wegner teams up with a huge European newspaper based in Berlin, which is read by about 10 million people every single day. And his thinking is that maybe someone would be able to recognize Jennifer if he posts that sketch of her inside an article. And the hope is that someone will potentially come forward. But so far, no one has. And again, maybe that connection between the military intelligence service is a solid one.
Yeah, because if you're a spy, you're going to try and lay low, aren't you?
There is also people that are talking about using current genetic genealogy and matching to various databases to see if they can find a match on her DNA, but the technology just isn't there just yet. Maybe they'll do that in the future. But again, still no clues there. So lastly, one final piece of information that I want to bring up today is that when investigators were searching her room, they did find one interesting clue, which at the time didn't seem very significant at all. But later on, internet sleuths have pointed out that maybe it had way more significance than was initially thought. But it's too late now to really put an investigation in place to investigate what this was all about. And that was, inside the room, there was a bag that contained a newspaper called US Today. And on that bag was written a single number. And that was the number 2816. Now, in context of this, that's only a few doors away from Jennifer Fairgate's room, which was 2805. The strange thing is, no one ever checked who was in that room 2816 on the night that she died or in the lead up or following her death. Could that have been where she vanished for those missing 24 hours? Was she in someone else's room in the hotel? Or maybe this is why her room was so spotless, because she was in another room.
Interesting. Or it could be a complete red herring. But yeah, is that somewhere she was told to go? She wrote it down? But that could be anything. That could be someone who handed it to her if it was on like a newsstand or whatever.
Possibly. But what's such an interesting number, so closely connected to her room 2805? What is the significance of that number 2816? I think maybe there was someone, maybe that's where Louis Fairgate was.
Maybe that's where she was told to go, or
that would explain where those missing shoes are and some of the items that were missing from the room. Maybe that's where they were. Maybe that's where she spent a lot of her time. Maybe that's where she slept at night because her room was so pristine and so sterile. It's bizarre.
Doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make sense. And also remember that briefcase. Why did she have it? Such a manly thing for a young woman to be carrying with her.
It housed the gun, right?
It held the gun, but also, interestingly, 24 other bullets. If you're going to kill yourself, you just need one, right?
Yeah, she is definitely a spy.
Yeah, it's bizarre, right? Sadly, because the hotel records from 1995 are gone, we have no way of knowing who was in room 2816 and whether or not they have any link to Jennifer or her identity.
This stuff must happen all the time in a way, because there's spies in the field and whatever they meet their end. You just think about the guy that was poisoned in the UK from Russia, wasn't it?
Yeah,
and that was off was it a door handle? I can't remember what happened. It was. But all these things that are going on like covertly, then it's probably this just hit the news and therefore got enough sort of interest by reporters and stuff like that, where actually it should have just been buried and made hush. It's just this particular one caught the attention.
There is another story called the Isdal woman, which is a name given to an unidentified woman who was found dead in Norway's Ice Valley in November 1970. And her body was charred, making it really difficult to identify her. So the investigation revealed that she had multiple identities. She wore a wig, she traveled from town to town, switching hotels every few days. And there's speculation that she might have been involved in Secret Service or was some kind of spy. And maybe she met the same grisly end where she was disposed of. What's the word? Expired. Terminated, like it's done. And so I think Jennifer Fairgate was a secret agent or a spy. Because think about it. If you've been told that you worked as a secret agent, you've done a great job, you understand the line of work that you're in, you're no longer needed, you need to go off to be murdered or killed or whatever.
Yeah, but I don't know if I buy that. Was she just assassinated? I don't feel like you'd go, we're going to kill you, unless there's obviously a sinister reason why they're going to try and get her to do that. And based on the way that she shot herself, or didn't shoot herself.
Shot herself.
Yeah, with air quotes. I think she was just assassinated. Maybe she was on a mission and it went wrong, or yeah.
Do you think if we draw a parallel to
James Bond?
No. If we draw a parallel to something a little bit closer to home, consider the Sherry Papini case, where there was speculation that they had potentially kidnapped the wrong person. So maybe Jennifer Fairgate was a victim of sex trafficking, hence Louis Fairgate. And maybe she was brought to the hotel room while they were waiting for her to be exchanged to whoever, maybe the client. And then they decided that actually they didn't want her anymore, and they decided to just discard her.
Yeah, another possible reason.
Would you like to see a little picture of her?
Hopefully alive.
Yeah, she's alive. She's a very striking woman. Mm-hmm. So that's the sketch that was done from her autopsy photographs.
So she's got, quite short hair, the kind of spiky, short black hair. And she's got quite a angular face, I guess you could say.
She's a handsome woman. But I just thought you might be interested in seeing her. I think it's important that we know what she looked like and that she was a real person.
I feel like the fact that she's got this short hair, there's low maintenance, I would think. Therefore, she could be, you could say, yes, maybe she was involved with, I don't know, spies, that kind of thing, undercover.
But she was also young. And the 90s, that's the style and the aesthetic that a lot of women had. Yeah. And it stood out.
Yeah.
And if you're a secret agent, you want to blend in. She stood out.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah. So that's the story of Jennifer Fairgate. Do you like it?
That was really good. It's frustrating that we don't know more about it.
Yeah.
And maybe there'll be bits that are unearthed in the future, but it feels like a bit as much as we're going to know.
There is.
Yeah.
We run the outro?
Let's do it.
And so we come to an end of another episode of The Compendium, an assembly of fascinating and intriguing things. If you found today's episode both fascinating and intriguing, then subscribe and leave us a review. Don't just stop there though. Schedule your episodes to download automatically as soon as they become available. We're on Instagram at The Compendium Podcast, so stop by and say hi, or you can visit us at our home on the web at thecompendiumpodcast.com. We release new episodes every Tuesday, and so until then, remember that even in a city as open as Oslo, some doors remain closed forever, and behind them might just be a story as complex as Jennifer Fairgate's. See you later.
See ya.